Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Nero Wolfe and the Orchid in the Crimson Study. The knock came just as the sleet turned to ice. It was 3 minutes past 4 by the mantel clock, the kind of cold that slicked the streets and brought the cab fare up twice what it ought to be. I was on the red chair near the radiator, thumbing through that month's photoplay, which I'll admit I read only for the back-page crime column. Fritz was in the kitchen, politely ignoring my presence as he practiced a sauce he'd never serve Wolfe. The door buzzer sounded once. No chime, no follow-up, just one firm press, as if the caller knew better than to try twice. I stood. "You'll want to check your collar, Archie," Fritz murmured. "The wind has turned." I did, brushing a snowflake off the lapel. The vestibule was grey with frost where it crept in through the glass. Through it, I saw her, tall, elegant, wrapped in a dark red wool coat with a fur collar that hadn't seen mothballs in years, a hat with netting dipped just low enough to hint at eyes without revealing intent. I opened the door the standard 4 inches. "May I help you?" I said. Neutral tone, stance casual. "My name is Mrs. Eugenia Kitteridge," she said. "I'm here to see Mr. Wolfe." Kitteridge. That rang a bell. "You have an appointment?" "No." She pulled her gloves off one finger at a time. "But I believe he'll want to speak with me." I studied her. Polished, sure, but not theatrical. Too steady for a crank, too composed for a fraud. I stepped back. Inside. I led her to the front room, gestured toward the red armchair. She didn't sit. She wandered to the fireplace, examined the orchid in its brass pot as if it were a thing on trial. I gave her the full 30 seconds. "Wait here," I said, and went to get Wolfe. He was in the plant room, of course. Yellow gloves, linen apron, glass sprayer in hand. "She's wearing red wool, standing in front of the fire, and thinks you'll want to speak with her," I said. "Do I?" he asked without turning. "She's a Kitteridge," I said. "The name's familiar. Manhattan District. Judge Horace Kitteridge, deceased 2 weeks ago." He turned slowly. "Heart failure," he said. "That's what they say." He took off the gloves. 5 minutes later, he was in the office, installed in the yellow chair like an emperor reluctantly tolerating a diplomat. Mrs. Kitteridge sat across from him, spine straight, hands folded in her lap like an etiquette manual. She wore the kind of perfume that came in glass bottles and made you think of wood-panelled elevators. "I don't take cases without cause," Wolfe said. "I'm aware. I also don't indulge theatrics, Mrs. Kitteridge." "Then allow me to be plain." She looked him dead in the eye. "I believe my husband was murdered." Wolfe didn't blink. I leaned forward slightly. "The cause was listed as heart failure," he said. "Yes. And the coroner was Dr. Kellum. He's been our physician for years." "And you think he lied?" "I think he was encouraged not to look further." Wolfe exhaled. Not quite a sigh, more like a release of tolerance. "What proof?" "None. Only a feeling." He closed his eyes. "Then this is a conversation, not a case." She didn't flinch. "I understand, but perhaps this will interest you." She reached into her bag. From it she pulled a folded cloth, linen, cream-coloured. She unfolded it delicately on the desk. Inside was a single photograph. Colour-tinted. It showed a man, Judge Horace Kitteridge, in his study. Beside him, a strange-looking flower, deep red petals, waxy and veined in a crystal pot. "This was taken 3 months ago," she said. "The orchid you see here sat in his study every day for the past 2 years." Wolfe opened one eye. "And?" "It is now missing." Wolfe straightened slightly. "You are certain?" "I packed the study myself after the funeral. It was gone. Not moved. Not misplaced. Gone. And none of the staff knew." She smiled faintly. "My husband trusted no one with his orchids. Not even me." Wolfe glanced at me. I raised an eyebrow. That was a new one. "What species?" he asked. She hesitated. "He called it Paphia pedalum crimson echo. Said it was a gift. Never told me from whom." Wolfe's eyes were fully open now. "There are only 4 confirmed specimens in the Western Hemisphere. Then mine was the 5th. "You're sure it's gone?" She nodded. "And your husband was the only one with access to that room?" "Yes." The study had its own key. He kept it on his chain. I now have that chain. The lock wasn't forced. Wolfe closed his eyes again, but this time his lips pursed. Thinking, calculating, resisting. "Mrs. Kitteridge," he said, "an orchid does not make a murder." "No, but murder may hide behind the theft of one." I let that one hang in the air. Wolfe shifted his weight. Not much, just enough to signal the pivot from dismissal to interest. "You have records of his will?" he asked. "Yes, I brought them." She opened her bag again. Wolfe waved it off. "Leave them. I'll examine them later. For now, tell me, who benefits from his death?" "Myself and the foundation." "Which foundation?" "The Kitteridge Endowment for Judicial Reform. My husband created it last year. He planned to grow it aggressively." Wolfe opened a drawer, pulled out a notebook, and made a mark. "Who controls it now?" "His former partner, Harold Fayweather, investment banker. I never trusted him." Wolfe looked at me. "Get me Fayweather's portfolio and the judge's banking movements for the past 6 months." "I can ask Lon to start tonight," I said. "Do." Mrs. Kitteridge stood. "Will you take the case?" she asked. "I will examine," Wolfe said, "not take." "That's enough for me." She extended a gloved hand. Wolfe ignored it. She turned to me. "Thank you, Mr. Goodwin." I walked her to the door. "You sure about this?" I asked. "No." She hesitated. "But I can't unsee what's missing." "Fair." I opened the door. As she stepped into the sleet, she turned once. "That orchid! It mattered to him more than I did." I watched her go. When I returned, Wolfe was already pouring beer into his glass. "She's lying," he said. "About what?" "About when the orchid disappeared." "You think she took it?" "No, but she noticed it missing too soon." "Maybe she always noticed it." "Possible," he said, "but unlikely. No one sees an orchid until it's gone." He drank. "I'll speak with Kramer tomorrow," he said. "Find out what was left off the official report. You're taking the case." He didn't reply, which for Wolfe was as close to a yes as you'd get on a Thursday. The rain had turned back to sleet by the time I stepped out of the cab on Gramercy Park. The doorman outside number 37 gave me a glance that measured wallet thickness. I gave him the Wolfe card instead. That usually did the trick. "Mrs. Kitteridge is expecting me," I said. He didn't blink. He opened the door without a word. I crossed the tiled vestibule and met a maid in a navy uniform standing by the elevator. "This way, Mr. Goodwin." She had the kind of voice that hadn't spoken above a whisper in 20 years. I followed her up to the second floor, where the door opened onto a wide front hall that reeked of waxed wood and quiet money. Mrs. Kitteridge waited in the drawing room. She wore a grey silk blouse and a black skirt, and the red coat was draped over the settee like a sleeping cat. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, rising. "Ma'am?" She gestured toward the hallway. "This way. The study is just past the stairs." I followed her through the thick carpet and heavier silence. The house was perfectly still. No clink of china, no faint radio, no kitchen noise. She opened the door with a brass key. The study was dim, drawn in velvet drapes and old tobacco. A desk stood to the left, a tall lamp beside it. There were 4 bookcases and 2 armchairs, both in maroon leather. And in the middle of it, above a small fireplace, was a vacant shelf. "That's where it sat," she said. I stepped closer. The shelf was inset, with a faint square of lighter varnish where something had once blocked the sun. "You didn't move it?" I asked. "No, I found it missing the day after the funeral." I crouched. The carpet had no indentations. Either it had been brushed or the orchid had been moved days earlier. "Who else has been in this room since then?" "No one." I gave her a look. She didn't waver. "I locked it myself." "All right." I stepped around the desk. "May I?" She nodded once and left me alone. I started with the window. Latches tight, no pry marks, no scuffs on the sill. The lock had been turned in from inside. Either the thief had a key or came while the judge still lived. I turned to the lamp. Its cord trailed down behind the desk, looped once, and then oddly doubled back as if it had been jerked, rethreaded. I made a mental note. The desk was neat, papers in stacks, a blotter with initials, pen tray. One drawer sat slightly ajar, not pulled open but not flush either. I leaned in. Inside were fountain pens, a pair of cufflinks, a tiny monogrammed coin purse. Nothing extraordinary. But the drawer rail was rubbed, as if it had been opened and closed more than the others. The armchairs were in proper formation, but one had a pillow slightly off-centre, and the cup on the side table had its handle turned inward, not out. I checked the carpet again. One small indentation near the hearth, round like a metal base, faint but fresh. The orchid had been taken. That much was certain, but not recently. I moved to the bookshelves. Most of the titles were legal. State Judiciary Reports, Law and Equity, Testamentary Review. One section looked newer, financial texts, 3 books on wartime bonds, and one slim volume titled Rare Orchids of the Old World. I pulled it out, pages uncut. A gift, likely unread. I replaced it. The air was thick with old cigar. Not recent, but not ancient either. Footsteps approached. I turned. The man in the doorway wore grey. His suit was pressed. His shoes were mirror black. He was thin, pale, and perfectly still. "Mr. Osborne," he said, nodding slightly. "Valet to the late judge." "Archie Goodwin, assistant to Nero Wolfe." He didn't blink. "I was told you might wish to speak with me." I indicated the chair. "Care to sit?" "I prefer to stand." "All right." He folded his hands. "You were with the judge the night he passed?" "I was." "What time did he retire?" "Just past 10. Anything unusual about that night?" "Only that he asked for warm milk. He never did that." "Why do you think he did?" "He said he had been feeling chilled." I nodded. "Did you fetch it?" "No, the maid did." "What time did you find him?" 7:30 the next morning." "Dead?" "Yes." "Who else had access to this room?" "No one but the judge, and occasionally his physician." "No secretary?" "He wrote his own letters." "Any visitors that week?" Osborne hesitated. "Yes, one." "Name?" "I don't know. A man, tall, carried a briefcase." "When did he come?" "The day before the judge died." "What time?" "Afternoon, around 3. "Did you let him in?" "No, the judge did." "How long did he stay?" 20 minutes. "Did he leave anything behind?" "No." "Did he take anything with him?" "I don't know." That was the first lie. "Did the judge seem upset afterward?" "No, just thoughtful." "Was that the last visitor?" "Yes." I glanced at the desk. "Do you know where the judge kept his financial records?" "Those would be in the safe." "There's a safe." Osborne stepped forward and tapped the lower panel behind the desk. It was discreet. Walnut, brass hinge, recessed dial. "Do you know the combination?" "No." I made a note. "Who would?" "Only the judge." "And now?" He gave the faintest shrug. "Perhaps his lawyer." "Name?" "Charles Whiteley." I wrote it down. "Do you know anything about orchids?" I asked. Osborne looked at me for a moment too long. "No." That was the second lie. "Thank you, Mr. Osborne. That'll be all." He nodded once and stepped back into the hall. I turned back to the room. The study hadn't been broken into. The door had not been forced. The window was untouched. Whatever had happened here, it happened before the judge died. I stepped outside. Mrs. Kitteridge waited by the stairs. "Well?" she asked. "It's not recent," I said. "Whoever took the orchid did so before he passed." Her jaw tightened. "You're certain?" "The shelf's been wiped. No dust ring. No scuff marks on the carpet. But the faint imprint of the pot still shows. My guess, 2 days before the funeral." She was quiet. "That man who visited," I said. "Do you know him?" "No." "Osborne said he came the day before the death." "I didn't know." "You didn't see him?" "I was out that afternoon." "Shopping?" "No, at the foundation." "All right." She reached into her purse and handed me a small envelope. "This came in the mail 3 days ago. No return address." Inside was a folded photograph. A photo of the orchid, not in the study, but sitting in a greenhouse. Different lighting, different shelf. It had a number written across the bottom, Lot 112C, delivered. "I thought you should see it," she said. I studied the handwriting. Clean, angular, male. "Thank you. I'll show this to Wolfe." She nodded. I left the house with the envelope in my pocket, the image of a stolen orchid now relocated, and a valet who lied twice in under 10 minutes. The judge had died in a locked house. No break-in, no fight. But something had shifted, and whatever it was, it started in that crimson study. It was the kind of morning that made coffee sacred and conversation optional. The snow hadn't stuck, but the cold had. I'd been at my desk for 20 minutes pretending to sort through receipts when I heard the front bell ring. Twice. Fast. No hesitation. That knock meant one thing. I opened the door, the standard crack. Kramer. He stood there in his camel hair overcoat, hat low, cigar unlit between his teeth. The usual look of disgust was already warming on his face. Goodwin. Inspector. Let me in. Wolfe's not seeing visitors. Tell him it's about Judge Kitteridge. That did it. I stepped back. Don't drip on the rug. He came in like a bulldozer in a library. The coat stayed on. The hat stayed on. I led him down the hall and knocked once before entering the office. Wolfe sat at his desk, hands steepled, lips tight. He didn't look up. Kramer. I should have known, Kramer said, brushing past me. She comes to you, you start sniffing, and here we go. I assume you refer to Mrs. Kitteridge, Wolfe said flatly. Kramer took the red chair and leaned forward. Leave it alone, Wolfe. That is not your prerogative. The case is closed. Wolfe finally looked at him. And what persuaded the coroner to close it? Kramer removed his cigar and pointed with it. Medical records. History of arrhythmia. Symptoms consistent with heart failure. Certified by Dr. Charles Kellam. You know, the man who'd been his physician for 12 years. Wolfe exhaled through his nose. Doctors certify death. They do not define its cause. Save the philosophy. What are you fishing for? Not fish, Inspector. Orchids. Kramer's brow dropped like a shade. She told you about the missing flower. She did. Tell me you're not chasing a case over a damn potted plant. The judge owned a specimen of Paphiopedilum crimson echo. Kramer grunted. You don't say. Which vanished the week of his death. Maybe it was sold, maybe it withered, maybe it walked. Or perhaps it was taken. Kramer crossed his arms. She's got you wrapped. No, Wolfe said. She has my attention. You barged in without invitation. That suggests I have yours. Kramer stood, paced once toward the bookshelf, then back. Look, I don't care what flower's gone. You want to play botanist, do it in your own time. But don't go riling up her lawyer, her banker, or her valet, especially not the valet. That man served with the 369th Infantry, decorated twice. Wolfe blinked. A valet with a distinguished military record. Fascinating. He's clean. I never suggested otherwise. You implied it by sniffing around. Did you question him? Yes. Was his account consistent with the medical report? Kramer narrowed his eyes. You're digging. No, I'm pruning. Kramer sat again. She said something about a visitor. She did not. Well, Osborne did. Said a man came the day before the judge died. No name, no details. Wolfe leaned forward an inch. Did he describe the man? No, claimed he couldn't. Curious, Wolfe murmured. Kramer tapped ash into a crystal tray. She wants to believe it was murder because it's neater than grief. Don't indulge her. She came for answers, not comfort. You'll give her neither. Wolfe said nothing. Kramer stood again. I've got real crimes to deal with. Don't make me add obstruction to the list. Wolfe arched an eyebrow. Inspector, you are free to leave whenever you like. That did it. Kramer walked to the door, paused, turned. I like you better fat and silent. I followed him out. Watch your step, I said. Carpet's expensive. He didn't answer. When I returned, Wolfe was staring into the middle distance. He's rattled, he said. He's always rattled. No, this time it's different. How so? He arrived early, without warrant, without invitation. He's trying to box you out. Yes, Wolfe nodded. And for that to matter, something must be in the box. He looked at me. I want the judge's medical records. From Kellam? No, from the Foundation's files. I'll see if Lon can dig it out. Also, the judge's last 6 months of banking activity. That'll take time. I'm not in a hurry, Wolfe said. You never are. Get started. I headed for the phone. Behind me, Wolfe leaned back, folded his hands and closed his eyes. Not to nap, but to sharpen the blades in his mind. Kramer had come to warn us off. That always meant one thing. We were already getting close. It was just past noon when I came through the brownstone door, a manila folder tucked under my arm and the wind still working its way out of my coat sleeves. Fritz was in the dining room, polishing silver that didn't need it, and Wolfe was, as expected, in the office, behind his desk, hands folded on his belly like he'd been carved that way. He didn't look up when I entered. "Well?" "I have 3 gifts," I said, setting the folder down beside the inkwell. "1 medical, 1 financial, 1 botanical. You get to unwrap them, in order." That got his attention. He reached for the folder without haste and pulled out the first document. "This is from Lon," I said. "Judge Kittredge withdrew $10,000 in cash from Eastern Fidelity 3 days before his death. No checks, no transfers, just cold, hard cash." Wolfe adjusted his glasses and read slowly. "No destination? None listed. And no trace of where it went?" "Not yet. Bank manager says the judge was calm, deliberate, told him it was for something personal." "That is not enlightening." "No," I said, "but 10 grand in 20s stuffed in a briefcase, that's more than a whim." Wolfe made a low sound in his throat and turned to the second document. "That's a copy of his will," I said, "amended 6 weeks ago. Guess who got cut down?" "Eugenia?" "By a third. She's still in there, but now the bulk goes to the Kittredge Foundation, which is run by Mr. Fayweather." "Correct." Wolfe closed the folder and leaned back. "Cash removed, beneficiary shift, and he dies 2 weeks later. Heart condition or not, that's motive." He tapped his finger on the desk 3 times. "You said botanical." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folded note. "Courtesy of Louis Brem, curator at the Brooklyn Orchidarium. He confirms what Mrs. Kittredge told us. Paphiopedilum crimson echo is practically extinct. Only 4 verified living specimens on record." "Where are they located?" "1 in Kew Gardens, 2 in private collections abroad, and the last one, was in Judge Kittredge's study." "Exactly." Wolfe opened the note. It was handwritten on thick cream stock. Confirmed. PCE is known to be extinct in the wild. 4th confirmed bloom last seen in Manhattan. Last trade record, 1941. Valuation unlisted, but estimated at $18,000. Wolfe's eyebrows climbed. 18,000? At least. And no public record of its disappearance? None. But if it was sold privately, it would be untraceable. Wolfe exhaled slowly. That plant was worth more than the furniture it sat beside. Maybe more than the study. I poured him a glass of beer and slid it across. He took it, nodded, and sipped. "The cash withdrawal," he said. "It was not for the orchid." "You're sure?" "Yes, the timeline is wrong. If he intended to sell it, the removal would have followed payment, not preceded it." "So, the cash was for something else? Or someone else? And the will change?" "Likely pressure, possibly blackmail." "From Fayweather?" Wolfe shook his head. "Too obvious." "Then who?" He didn't answer. I stepped to the window and watched a cab try to nudge its way through slush. "You think the judge knew he was in danger?" I asked. Wolfe swirled his beer. "He altered his will. He removed a valuable object from a locked room. He withdrew cash. Yes, I believe he feared something." "Then why not leave instructions?" "Perhaps he did." "Where?" "Yet to be found." I turned. "I want to go back to the study." "Take Saul with you." "Tonight?" "Yes. Look for anything that was moved, removed, or newly added. Hidden compartments, notes, receipts." "Osborne won't like it." "No," Wolfe said, "but I don't particularly care." I paused, then set down the last slip of paper. "There's one more thing." Wolfe waited. "Brem mentioned a rumour. Someone tried to buy a Crimson Echo last month. Cash only. No name given. Description was vague, but Bream says the buyer had a military bearing. Short-cropped hair, clean nails, gloves, even indoors." "Osborne?" I nodded. "It's not confirmation, but it fits." Wolfe leaned back again, closed his eyes. I waited. 5 full minutes passed. When he spoke, it was quiet. "We are being steered, Archie." "By who?" "That is the question. But the path is deliberate. We are being shown only what someone wants us to see." "You think Eugenia is withholding?" "I think everyone is." I sat down across from him. "What now?" "Bring Saul, return to the Kittredge house, begin again, from the inside out." "And Kramer?" "Leave him be." He won't like that. No, Wolfe said, but he may find it clarifying. I stood, buttoned my coat and reached for my hat. I'll make the call. Thank you, Archie. Wolfe opened the folder again and stared at the will. As I stepped into the hall, I heard him mutter, not to me, not even to himself, but to the air. 3 reasons to doubt. I require only 1. It began with a phone call from Saul Panzer. He was brief as always. No record, no license, no birth cert, no reference pre-Kitteridge. Osborne's a ghost. I asked if he was sure. Dead sure. Either fake name or fake life. You want me to lean harder? No. Thanks, Saul. That's plenty for now. I hung up, turned to Wolfe and gave him the news. No record of employment prior to November, I said. No draft card. No apartment lease before the one Kitteridge provided. The man might as well have stepped out of a fog bank. Wolfe didn't react immediately. He took a long breath and drummed his fingers on the arm of the yellow chair. Keep going, he said. I picked up the binoculars from the side table. Osborne's out today. Left the Kitteridge house at 10:05. Black wool coat, leather gloves, grey fedora. He's currently at the intersection of Lexington and 43rd, waiting for something. Someone, Wolfe corrected. He was right. I took the roadster, parked halfway down the block, stayed 2 doors behind and didn't use the horn. Osborne walked with an ease that didn't match his role. Spine straight, eyes forward, every turn premeditated. He stopped in front of a brokerage building just off Park Avenue. Fayweather and Strand, private clients. That made my stomach stir. 2 minutes later, the glass doors opened. Out walked a man in a 3-piece suit, clean-shaven, crisp handkerchief in his breast pocket. Harold Fayweather, banker, estate trustee, and now unofficial co-beneficiary of Judge Kitteridge's revised will. He nodded once to Osborne. They didn't shake hands, just fell in step, side by side. I pulled back and stayed out of range. They walked 2 blocks to the corner of 46th, turned right, and entered a private brownstone. No signage. 1 brass plaque that read, "The Caledon Club, members only." I made a note. They stayed inside for 36 minutes. When they exited, Osborne turned east. Fayweather turned west. No glance, no word, just clean separation. I chose Fayweather. He walked briskly to a waiting Packard, stepped in and rode away. I took down the plate and headed back to the brownstone. Wolfe was finishing lunch when I entered. Trout, cucumber salad, beer. Fritz cleared the dish just as I stepped in. "Well?" Wolfe asked. They met at a brokerage, walked to a private club, then parted ways. No words exchanged in public, no papers carried. But they knew each other. That much was clear. Want me to press Fayweather?" "No," Wolfe said, "not yet." He turned toward the orchid shelves and folded his hands behind his back. "Tell me, Archie, why would a stockbroker and a valet meet in secret?" "Old friends?" "No." "Blackmail?" "Possible. Or something simpler." "Such as?" "Business," Wolfe said. "Not financial. Logistical." He returned to his chair. "The orchid," he said. "The rarest one. Crimson Echo." "Gone," I added. And only the judge and Osborne had access. Wolfe nodded slowly. "Suppose the orchid was not ornamental, but instrumental." "To what?" "To laundering, Mr. Goodwin." I raised an eyebrow. "An orchid as asset. Rare, untraceable, globally valued, portable." "You think it masked movement of funds?" "Think? No. Suspect. Deeply." He reached for his notebook and jotted a list. Osborne. No history. Fayweather. Will beneficiary. Orchid. Vanished. Ledger. Unseen. "The judge feared discovery," Wolfe murmured. "He changed his will. He removed cash, perhaps to pay for silence, perhaps to secure flight." "Then why didn't he flee?" I asked. Wolfe didn't answer. After a pause, he spoke again. "Get me everything on the Caledon Club." "Understood." Discreetly. "Of course." I left the room as he turned back to the orchids. That afternoon, Lon found the Caledon registered in 1932, filed under Heritage Cultural Preservation League. 16 members, all men, 5 living. One of them, Harold Fayweather. Another name appeared in the charter list. Clyde Neely. The name meant nothing to me, but when I brought it to Wolfe, he didn't blink. "Check Neely's record," he said. Lon did. Clyde Neely had disappeared in 1940 after a securities fraud investigation. Never found. Presumed dead. I looked at Wolfe. You think Osborne is Neely? I do. Can we prove it? We must. Wolfe leaned back. Get Saul on it. Deep dive. Alias, photograph, facial structure, military records. And if it's him? Then we know how the judge was cornered. And how he died. Not yet, Wolfe said. But we will. I went to call Saul. Wolfe remained still. He didn't need motion. He had deduction. The elevator rattled once as it reached the 20th floor, then sighed open like a bored valet. The office of Fayweather and Strand looked just like you'd hope a private brokerage firm didn't, all polished brass, leaded windows, and the faint scent of highball rye lingering from someone else's better afternoon. A girl in a dark blue dress jacket sat at the reception desk, penciling her nails into almond points. She didn't look up. Good afternoon, I said. Archie Goodwin, appointment with Mr. Fayweather. She looked me over like a clerk inspecting counterfeit bills, then pressed a button on the intercom. Mr. Goodwin to see you. She didn't wait for the reply, just gestured left. End of the corridor. I tipped my hat and moved past cubicles that had never seen a layoff, past 3 doors marked private in gold leaf, until I reached the last. It opened before I knocked. Harold Fayweather stood in the doorway, half a smile forming, eyes unreadable. He was younger than I'd expected, no more than 50, but polished in that way that implies old wealth and older secrets. Mr. Goodwin, he said, do come in. The office had 2 leather chairs, a wide walnut desk, and a window view worth robbing a bank for. He motioned to one of the chairs. I sat. He didn't. To what do I owe the pleasure? I'm here on behalf of Mr. Wolfe. Ah, of course. He moved behind the desk. I wondered when the great orchid detective would enter the fray. Not about orchids, actually. No? Well, I said, not entirely. He gave the kind of smile meant to disarm juries. You advised Judge Kittredge on bond investments, correct? I did. War bonds. Risky ones. They were patriotic, and not entirely unprofitable. He trusted you. Fayweather hesitated. Sometimes. Enough to name you a trustee of his estate. That wasn't my doing. But you didn't decline the honour. Would you? I didn't answer. Did you see him the week he died? I did. When? Monday afternoon. In his study. He invited you? Yes. We discussed concerns. What kind of concerns? He folded his hands. He feared he was being watched, followed. He was uneasy. He said things didn't feel secure. What did you say? I told him to calm down, that he was imagining shadows. Was he? Fayweather paused. Not entirely. How so? He looked out the window. There were inconsistencies, account movements he didn't authorize, a missing file, and one unusual asset he kept bringing up. Which was? You already know. The orchid. Yes. He offered it to you, didn't he? Fayweather turned, his eyes narrowed slightly. Interesting guess. Educated. He stood, walked to the bar cabinet, poured 2 fingers of something brown into a glass and offered none. He said it was unique, that it could buy silence. Yours? Yes. Silence about what? Fayweather turned back. I asked him that. He didn't answer. He just smiled, as though the answer would be my problem soon enough. And was it? He sipped. I don't know yet. You didn't take the orchid? No. Why not? I didn't need to. But you knew where it was. He nodded. In the study. Centre shelf, always turned toward the window. When did you last see it? He paused. 2 days before his death. Still there? Yes. I let that settle. You're sure it was real? Fayweather laughed. Real? You don't fake an orchid like that. Crimson petals like blood under lacquer. Leaves striped like a panther's back. It glowed. And now it's gone. So I've heard. You didn't take it. He met my gaze. No. Did Osborne? That made him flinch. I don't know. You trust him? I don't trust valets. They're like wallpaper. Decorative, but always listening. Then you noticed something. Fayweather leaned forward. He asked questions he shouldn't have, about accounts, about bonds, about insurance. Did you tell the judge? Yes. What did he do? Fired him. My brows rose. He's still working for the estate. Fayweather set down his glass. Then the judge must have reconsidered, or something changed. Did the judge ever mention a ledger? Fayweather blinked. What kind of ledger? A record of transactions? Private ones? No. You're sure? Yes. I didn't believe him. Last question, I said. Why was Eugenia's portion reduced? He didn't blink. She didn't know how to keep her mouth shut. I stood. Thank you, Mr. Fayweather. If Wolfe has further questions, he won't write. He sends me. Of course. I left him in the window light, glass in hand, trying to look like he wasn't watching me leave. Outside, the sky had turned grey again, but I'd gotten what I came for. Not the truth, just enough of its shape to know which way the shadows bent. I heard the knock on my door just as I was adjusting my tie. 2 short taps, polite, precise. That ruled out clients, police, and half my friends. I opened it to find Fritz standing there, looking uneasy. Fritz never looked uneasy. I found something, he said quietly. Let me guess, I said. A note from Mrs. Kitteridge in the wine rack. No, in the plant room. That stopped me. He turned, already heading toward Wolfe's sanctum. I followed him past the hall, through the arched glass door, and into Wolfe's orchid room. The humidity hit first, then the light. It was always strange in there, filtered green and gold, quiet as prayer. Fritz led me to the west table, 4th tier down. I was clearing leaf droppings and adjusting the mist pipe. This was wedged behind the leg. He handed me a cream envelope, unmarked but sealed with a red wax circle, the kind you didn't see outside of old boarding schools or opera boxes. I turned it over. The back read, "To be delivered to Nero Wolfe in the event of my death." Signed, Horace Kitteridge, postmarked 2 days before he died. You didn't open it, I asked. Fritz looked offended. I am not Archie Goodwin. Fair. I held the envelope like it might burn, then nodded toward Wolfe's office. Come with me. He hesitated. Fritz. He followed. Wolfe was, of course, at his desk. He'd just returned from his afternoon session with the Vanders and hadn't yet touched his beer. Fritz has something, I said. Wolfe arched one eyebrow. Fritz stepped forward and handed him the envelope without a word. Wolfe read the label, turned it in his hand, and studied the wax. Then he reached for a letter opener. He broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet. Heavy paper, navy ink, elegant script. Wolfe read silently. His eyes darkened. I leaned closer. He read aloud. Mr. Wolfe, if this reaches you, it means I have failed. I had little doubt. They know. I am convinced of it. I have placed the ledger where it will not be found easily, inside the crimson study, behind the 3rd volume of Savigny. It will tell you what they feared. The man who calls himself Osborne is not who he says he is. I believe he was sent, perhaps not by Fayweather, but by someone like him. If I fall, do not assume God took me. Follow the orchid. H.K. Silence. Even Fritz looked pale. Wolfe laid the page flat on the blotter. The handwriting is authentic, he said. You know where the ledger is. In Savigny's Roman Law, 3rd volume, likely hollowed. And this letter? It confirms what we suspected. That Osborne's a fraud. That and more. That the orchid was a mask. A code. I sat. He said, "Follow the orchid." Wolfe nodded. Yes. He means Crimson Echo. Likely. And the ledger, it ties to Fayweather. Or worse, Fayweather may be the visible limb, not the root. I glanced at Fritz. You didn't see anyone enter the plant room? No, the envelope was behind the stand. It may have been dropped or placed deliberately. Wolfe tapped the desk. No stamp, he said. No delivery marks. He hand-delivered it, I asked. Or had someone else do it? I stood. I want that ledger. You'll take Saul. Tonight? Now. He turned to Fritz. Prepare supper early. We'll dine at 6. Fritz bowed. Wolfe looked again at the letter. Judge Kitteridge feared death. That much is plain. What is not plain? He paused. Is who arranged it for him? I nodded. Time to find out. The waiting room smelled of liniment, polished tile, and forgotten umbrellas. A nurse in white crossed behind the desk, her heels clicking like punctuation. I checked my watch, crossed one leg, and turned a page in the magazine I hadn't read. At 11:07, the frosted glass door opened. "Dr. Kellum will see you now, Mr. Goodwin." He was taller than I expected, grey at the temples, pale hands, a manner that managed to be both clinical and theatrical. He motioned to the chair opposite his desk. "You're with Nero Wolfe?" "I am." "And you're here about Judge Kitteridge?" "Exactly." He nodded once, sat, and steepled his fingers. "What would you like to know?" "Everything that happened the night he died." Kellum tilted his head slightly. "Again?" Fresh ears. He sighed, leaned back, and began. "I received a call at 7:45 a.m. from the house. Osborne told me he found the judge unresponsive. I arrived shortly after 8. No signs of trauma. Pulse absent. Colour consistent with cardiac arrest. I signed the death certificate at 9:12. "No autopsy?" "None requested." "Did you recommend one?" "No. The judge had a history, arrhythmia, 2 previous episodes, both recorded." "And who else was there when you arrived?" "Mrs. Kitteridge, the valet, the nurse." I paused. "What nurse?" He looked at me. "The night nurse. She was still upstairs when I got there." "Name?" I didn't ask. "Description?" "Short, blonde, pale, wore a navy blue uniform, not white, quiet." "What did she say?" "Very little. Said she checked on him hourly. Found him still at 7 o'clock. Found him gone at 7:30. "You're sure she said that?" "I remember clearly." "What happened to her?" "She left while I was speaking with Mrs. Kitteridge, quietly." "She wasn't hired through an agency?" "No idea." I nodded. "Mind if I quote you?" "You're already memorizing." He was right. "Thank you, Doctor. One last thing." "Yes?" "Was the judge expecting to die?" He paused, then answered. "No, he was expecting something, but not death." Outside, I lit a cigarette and walked 3 blocks north to Gramercy. The doorman at the Kitteridge building recognized me and buzzed me in without a word. Mrs. Kitteridge met me in the sitting room. Black dress, no jewellery, a book she hadn't opened. "Mr. Goodwin, I need to ask about the night of your husband's death." "I've told all I know." "Let's try again. Was there a nurse here?" Her eyes narrowed. "No." "Dr. Kellum says otherwise." "Then Dr. Kellum is mistaken." He described her. Blue uniform, blonde, quiet. Mrs. Kitteridge stood. There was no nurse. Osborne and I were the only staff on duty that night. "You're sure?" "I would know if a stranger walked into my home." "Would you?" She flinched. "What do you mean?" "You said Osborne handled the night routine." "He did." "Then if someone came to the door, it was him who opened it." Yes." "And you slept through?" "Yes." I nodded slowly. "I believe you." She hesitated. "Why would the doctor lie?" "Because someone else wanted him to believe it." She looked away. "I don't understand." "Neither do I said. "Not yet." The doorman downstairs didn't smile. He was built like an overcoat rack and just as welcoming. "You remember the night Judge Kitteridge died?" I asked. "Yep." "Anyone come in or out between midnight and 8 o'clock a.m.? "Nope." "You're sure?" He looked at me. "I got a clock and a chair. That door's in front of both." "So no night nurse?" "No nurse, no florist, no priest, no one but Osborne at 6:50 and you people the next morning." I thanked him and left. By the time I made it back to the brownstone, the sleet had returned. Fritz took my coat. Wolfe looked up from his desk. "Well?" "Kellum says a nurse was present, described her in detail." Wolfe frowned. "And Eugenia?" "Denied it. Said no such person was ever hired." "Doorman?" "Confirmed it. No one entered or left." Wolfe was quiet. "That implies only one thing," I said. "Yes," he agreed. "Someone impersonated a nurse." "Osborne?" "Possible." "He wouldn't fit the description." "No." "But he could admit her." "Yes." Wolfe leaned back. "She saw the body. That is important. She could have tampered. She could have ensured the judge stayed dead. Injection? Perhaps. Or simply observation, to confirm no recovery." "Who was she working for?" Wolfe closed his eyes. "Fayweather, or Osborne, or both." Think Eugenia knew? No. And Kellum? He believed what he saw. We were quiet. Wolfe reached for his beer. Someone orchestrated a performance, he said. A nurse, I added. Who wasn't? It was the kind of midtown block that had lost its shine but still smelled of old money and heat pipes. Between a shuttered hatter and a delicatessen with a Yiddish sign that had outlasted the century, I found the door. Slate grey, unmarked, recessed behind a wrought-iron gate and a shoulder-high hedge box that had no business surviving the Manhattan wind. Rule Orchids. No hours posted. No bell. Just glass, etched with vines. I knocked once and waited. After 20 seconds, I tried again. Finally, the lock clicked. The woman who opened the door looked like someone who'd once been carved out of oak and then grown vines around her spine. Her hair was snow white. Her apron was moss green. Her face said I'd interrupted something precious. Yes. I gave her my best unassuming smile. I'm looking for something rare. I was told you might help. Her brow didn't lift. We aren't open to the public. That's a shame, I said, because my employer is a man who grows nothing but orchids, and he grows them well. She stared at me another moment, then stepped aside. Don't touch anything. The inside smelled of humid air and leaf oil. Every shelf was tiered, every plant labelled in neat looping hand. I kept my hands in my coat pockets and followed her down a path of brick that hadn't been cleaned in a week. She led me to the back. I'm Magda Rule, she said. Who is your employer? Nero Wolfe. Her mouth twitched, the closest she got to impressed. I've heard of him. He grows from seed. When it suits him, she crossed her arms. You said you wanted something rare. How rare? I was told, I said, that you might have acquired a Paphiopedilum crimson echo recently. That stopped her. She blinked once, then narrowed her eyes. Who told you that? I shrugged. A man who knows orchids. He said it came through here. I don't discuss my clients, even fake ones. Silence. I waited. She turned. This way. She led me to a curtained alcove. The curtain was green. The air behind it was warmer. 1 table, 3 pots, and in the centre, the orchid. It was unmistakable. Blood-red petals, dark-spotted, a stem like lacquered bone. Is that it? I asked. She nodded. Came in last week. Name of the seller? Dylan March. Fake? Obviously. Why accept it? Because I don't ask questions, she said, and because I wanted it. Describe him. She closed her eyes. Tall, late 50s, trim, gloves, didn't remove his hat, smelled of wood polish, moved like a soldier. Clean nails? Yes. Accent? Neutral, almost practiced. Cash. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a long black envelope. Old gold certificates, she said. Not in use since the 30s. All pristine. You kept them? I don't deposit things that don't belong in banks. Mind if I look? She handed the envelope over. Inside were 3 bills. Crisp. Real. He didn't want change, she added. Of course not. I handed them back. Have you sold the orchid? No. Would you? To Wolfe? Yes. She nodded. Only if he knows what it's worth. He does. And what it means. I'm starting to. I paused. Do you know what it meant to the seller? She considered. Number. But he said something odd. What was it? When I asked where he found it, he said, it was waiting. Anything else? Yes. When I asked why he was selling, he said, because the silence is paid for. I didn't write it down. I didn't need to. Do you have a receipt? I asked. No. Did he ask for one? No. And you didn't press? I don't press men who carry old money and no questions. Smart. I turned to the orchid. I need to borrow it. She raised a brow. For how long? Just long enough for someone to see it. If Wolfe wants it, he'll come himself. Good. I stepped back. Thank you, Miss Rule. Magda. Magda. She walked me to the door. If he sends you again, she said, bring coffee. Black. No sugar. I smiled. You drive a hard bargain. I like men who ask the right questions, she said, and know when not to. The door shut behind me with a soft finality. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe didn't need a full report. He sat at his desk, I gave him the highlights. She confirmed it. Orchid matches. Seller matches Osborne. Name's fake. Payment was in obsolete gold certificates. He stirred in his chair. Gold certificates? 3 of them. Amount? 15,000. That was silence, Wolfe said. Paid for, he nodded. And you believe her? Every word, he exhaled. Then the plant was currency, not decoration. Yes. And Osborne is laundering secrets, not money. Exactly. Wolfe turned to the window. We need the ledger, I nodded. Saul's already on it. Good. He reached for his glass. Archie. Yes? Let Magda know I respect her. I think she already knows. The envelope was unmarked, the kind Saul always used when what was inside could sing. Fritz handed it to me at the threshold of the office with a raised eyebrow. I nodded, stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Wolfe was in the yellow chair, his eyes closed, not napping but sifting, the way a fox might listen to wind through brush. I laid the envelope on the desk. Saul confirmed it. Wolfe opened his eyes. Osborne? Was Clyde Neely, securities forger, vanished 10 years ago. Everyone thought he drowned off Tampa. Everyone was mistaken. I pulled the photos out. Side-by-side shots. One grainy mugshot from 39 and one newer image from a surveillance angle. Osborne in profile, standing outside Fayweather's club. He changed the hair, lost 20 pounds, gained polish, I said. But the jawline and the brow don't lie. Saul got an ear match. Wolfe studied the photos. Neely was never caught. Not formally. He vanished mid-indictment. Meaning he had help. Or a fallback. Wolfe tapped his forefinger twice against the mugshot, and he reappeared as a valet to Judge Kitteridge. For 2 months before the judge's death. That's not coincidence, Wolfe murmured. No. He inserted himself where the records lived. I nodded. And maybe where the ledger was kept. Wolfe leaned back. The orchid was never the prize. No. It was a faint, beautiful, distracting, expensive misdirection. Wolfe turned to the fire. He knew what the judge had. He needed time to find it, and when the judge resisted, he made sure he wouldn't again. We were quiet. I laid a second page on the desk. Saul also pulled this. Neely had a known associate. Bookkeeper turned fence, name of Harlan Stokes. Did 6 years in Leavenworth, paroled last spring. Location: Flatbush. Lives in the back of a clock shop. No listed employment. Wolfe nodded. We may need to pay him a visit. I stood. But the ledger, Wolfe said, wasn't with Neely. Correct. And not at the judge's house, or we'd have it already. Also correct, he exhaled through his nose. Which means it's still hidden. He shook his head. Number not hidden. Planted. You think the judge knew he was being watched? I think he wrote a letter confirming it. Then where would he put something Neely couldn't find? Wolfe closed his eyes. Where Neely would never look. Eugenia? No. Fayweather? Not directly. Where then? Wolfe opened his eyes. You said Neely paid Magda Rule in gold certificates? Yes. He wouldn't have spent that unless the real asset had been secured. The ledger. Precisely. I turned. What about the safe in the Crimson Study? Wolfe shook his head. Too obvious, and we already searched it. Then where? He glanced toward the shelves. Bring me the volume labelled Lombard Banking Practices, 3rd shelf. I retrieved the book. Wolfe opened it. Inside, nothing, just aging paper and Wolfe's notation on page 34. He closed it. If the judge was clever, he said, he hollowed a volume. Which one? Wolfe didn't answer. I sat. What's Neely's play now? Vanishing again. For good this time. With the ledger? If he has it, yes. And if he doesn't? He'll try one last time. Tonight? Soon? I leaned forward. Then we bait him. Wolfe's eyes glinted. Yes. We leak a copy. Something partial. Just enough to stir him. Through Magda? She'll play her part. Wolfe nodded. Prepare it. And Osborne? He'll come back. To clean up. Yes. I rose. And when he does? Wolfe smiled slightly. We'll be waiting. The snow had melted into a greasy slurry that streaked the gutters and soaked through to your socks before you could say insurance fraud. It was just past 5 when I reached the steps of the Kitteridge brownstone. Osborne was nowhere in sight. Good. That meant fewer explanations, fewer polite lies. I still had the key Mrs. Kitteridge had lent me. Formally, it was for observation. Informally, it was for excavation. I let myself in and crossed the entry quietly. The house had the kind of silence that didn't just suggest no one was home, it demanded it. The crimson study still wore its funeral suit, drapes drawn, fireplace unlit, the air like dried tobacco and finality. I didn't switch the light on. The lamp in the corner glowed faintly, just enough to paint shadows where secrets might hide. I started with the bookshelves. Again. There were 6 of them. 4 along the side wall, 2 flanking the fireplace. Most were locked into built-in frames, but the one nearest the radiator, the west side, had always seemed just a little crooked. Not enough to notice unless you were watching it resist its place. I kneeled beside it. The shelf bore faint scuffing on the inside edge of the wood. Narrow, repeated, like something had been opened and pressed shut more than once. It didn't match the wear elsewhere in the room. The judge didn't have a dog. And this didn't happen by accident. I ran my fingers along the baseboard. Then just behind the radiator bracket. There, a sliver of brass, no wider than a dime. I pressed. There was a click. The panel swung forward by less than an inch, revealing a steel door no larger than a bread box, flush with the wall, dull grey, and whisper quiet. A safe. No dial. Just a keyhole. I stood. Went back to the desk. Checked the top drawer again. Blotter, nib pen. 2 keys tied with red string. The first key opened the drawer itself. The second matched the steel. I returned, slid the key in, turned once. It opened with the reluctant grace of a man rising from his deathbed. Inside was a leather ledger. No markings on the spine, no dust, no date. I took it in both hands and sat in the judge's chair. I opened it. The handwriting was his. Neat, composed, inked in blue and underlined in crimson pencil. Client 1, RB. Initial investment, $10,000, cash. Requisitioned through intermediary, unnamed. Asset stored, unregistered bearer bonds, Vault C3 commission structure, 7% over 18 months. Status, closed, December, 1946. Client 2, HF initial investment, $18,000 gold certificates. Asset form, war surplus shares, classified ledger, held in dual name trust, KF plus HF commission structure, 9% over 24 months. Status, active, and so on. 6 names. Some masked in initials, others not. All with transactions marked non-taxable, secured off-book, or deniable. Each entry carried dates, amounts, and methods. The last one, Client 6, ON, unknown name, unverified identity. Initial deposit, none activity, surveillance, asset targeting, entered employ, October 9. Unknown credentials, accessed, ledger room, November 15th. Suspicious activity, match to past profile, Neely. Status, active. Next review, November 22nd. That was 2 days before the judge died. I didn't say anything out loud, but something in me whispered, this is it. This was what he died over. I closed the book, returned it to the safe, left the key turned in the lock. On my way out, I passed Osborne in the lower hall. He was just returning with a wrapped bundle in his arms, groceries likely. He gave a small nod. I returned it. Mr. Goodwin, he said. Osborne. Find what you were looking for? Not yet, I said, but I will. He held my gaze a little too long, then looked away. I left. The street was dark now, lamplight on slush. The air still held the last of the storm. By the time I reached the brownstone, Wolfe was already pouring beer into his glass. He looked up as I stepped in. Well? I found it. Where? Hidden panel behind the radiator. West bookcase. Brass catch. No one without cause would have found it. Contents? A ledger. His own hand. Subjects? 6 men. Fayweather included. He nodded. And? Final entry was 2 days before his death, about Osborne. He'd begun suspecting Neely's identity. Wolfe leaned back. Was it enough to kill him? Yes. And the orchid? A cover, maybe a signal, but the real asset was that ledger. He tapped his temple twice. Bring it here. Tomorrow, he frowned. You left it. In the safe, with the key turned. You wanted him to know. Yes, he smiled. Then he'll come for it. And we'll be waiting. Precisely. Fritz entered, tray in hand. Dinner was ready, but the trap had just begun. The room was warm, faint with orchid musk and Fritz's late lunch. Wolfe hadn't shifted since I'd brought the ledger in. The yellow chair cradled his bulk like an ancient throne, and in front of him, across the red-lacquered table, the object in question lay unopened. The room was still. I'd seen courtrooms with less tension. Fritz had laid out the tea, 3 cups. Wolfe hadn't touched his. I had, once. Miss Eugenia Fayweather had not. She sat very straight in the red chair closest to the fireplace, one ankle crossed over the other, gloved hands folded on her lap like she was waiting for a séance to start. She looked older today, or rather, more brittle. Maybe the shadow across her cheekbones made it seem that way, or maybe it was that her mask of widow's grief had finally cracked. Wolfe stirred only slightly. Then his voice. This, he said, tapping a meaty finger on the ledger's spine, was found in a concealed recess beneath a radiator in your husband's study. It records transactions, beginning April of last year, terminating 2 days before his death. Transactions of a questionable nature. Eugenia's eyes did not move, but her knuckles, white around the silk of her gloves, tightened. Does it? She said softly. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. It does. Among other entries there are payments, transfers, names. One of them, Mr. Marius Fayweather, your brother-in-law. Another, your former art dealer. The entries suggest in part laundering of funds, political bribery, and misappropriation of certain trust accounts, including those managed by your late husband. I watched her. She didn't blink. Do you deny knowledge of this ledger? Madam? Wolfe asked. Her gaze dropped then, only by a degree, to the brown leather book in front of her, then back to Wolfe. I don't deny it, she said. Indeed. I knew it existed. I didn't know where it was, but I knew what it was. Wolfe's nostrils flared slightly, and he leaned back. Not quite a lean, but a recline of weight, like a lion settling into shade. And yet you came to me not for justice, but for leverage. Eugenia's chin lifted. Her voice was calm. They left me with nothing. Do you know what happens to a widow with no husband, no friends, and a whisper of scandal? I came to you for insurance. Insurance, Wolfe said coldly, does not smell of concealment and panic. You feigned ignorance. You supplied distractions. You misled. Her reply came not with anger, but something nearer fatigue. You wouldn't have helped me if I'd told you the truth. Correct. There was a pause. Then she leaned forward, slowly, eyes fixed on the edge of the table. I never wanted to expose them. I only wanted to make sure they knew I could. Wolfe frowned. You could have taken this ledger to Kramer. And achieved what? She said. A scandal? Trials that never happen? A dozen lawyers paid with the same money they stole? Her hand trembled once and then was still again. You think I came here to be a crusader? I didn't. I came because I was scared. I spoke for the first time. Scared of what, Mrs. Fayweather? Her eyes met mine. They were bloodshot but dry. Of who killed my husband, she said. Of what would happen if they found the ledger before I did. Of what else I might become. Wolfe exhaled. Not quite a sigh, more a release of gathered air. He gestured faintly toward the tray. Have your tea, madam. She didn't move. Wolfe's tone cooled further. You are dismissed, Mrs. Fayweather. Just like that? Just like that, he said. You lied. You endangered my home and my man. And now the truth arrives, belatedly and without grace. She stared. Then she stood, slowly with dignity, as if shedding a layer of skin. She reached for her handbag, hesitated, and then spoke again. I lied, she said. Yes. Wolfe remained motionless. But there's something else, something I hadn't intended to say, but now perhaps I must. Wolfe didn't respond, but I knew him. His eyes narrowed by a fraction. She looked between us. Her voice was lower now. The night of the funeral, she said. I couldn't sleep. I wandered. It was foolish, sentimental. I went back to the house. You were in the judge's home after the burial? Yes. I let myself in through the garden entrance. The staff had gone. I wanted to walk the halls, say goodbye in my own way. Wolfe's fingers pressed against one another, tips touching. I stayed silent. I lit the lamp in the crimson study, she continued. I stayed no more than 10 minutes. But as I was leaving, I heard something. What? Footsteps, she said. Someone on the carpet behind me. I turned and saw, just briefly, mum, someone stepping through the door behind the curtain. Who? Osborne, she said. The valet, the man with the terrible eye. He saw me too. Wolfe's voice had a new edge. You are certain? Yes. He ducked back the moment he saw me. I called out, but he was gone. Why have you withheld this until now? She gave a small, bitter smile. Because I didn't want you to ask me the same question I asked myself. And what question is that? If he was there before I entered the study, she said, or after. There was a silence. Wolfe's eyes closed briefly. His mouth thinned. That will be all, Mrs. Fayweather. She turned then, not sharply, but with a slow pivot. She didn't wait for Fritz. She opened the door herself, stepped out, and was gone. A moment later we heard the front door close. I let out a long breath and glanced at Wolfe. He hadn't moved. You believe her? I asked. No, I waited. But she saw him, he said. That, I believe. And if he was there before, Wolfe opened his eyes, he's the killer. And if after? Then he's the scavenger. I leaned against the wall, watching the dying light turn the windows amber. Either way, I said, he's not done. No, Wolfe said, but we are nearly so. He reached for the ledger and opened it. The pages fell open like they'd been waiting. The phone rang at 7:14 a.m., which, under our roof, counted as a mortal sin. I was in the kitchen nursing Fritz's notion of breakfast, warm scones, stewed prunes, and coffee brewed to resurrect the dead, when the shrill tone cut through the peace. Wolfe was upstairs, presumably communing with his orchids, and would no more have answered a ringing phone before 9 than volunteered for war. So it fell, as it always did, to me. I set the cup down, brushed the crumbs from my lapel, and crossed into the front room. Wolfe's residence, I said, keeping my voice at civil volume. Mr. Goodwin, this is Magda Rule. It took a second. Then the name snapped into place like a card on the board. Miss Rule, you're calling early. I apologize. I wouldn't disturb you if it weren't important. Go ahead. Her voice had tension behind it, the sort that rides shotgun to unease. I was watering the orchid, she said, the one Mr. Osborne delivered. Yes? There was something underneath it, folded paper, tucked under the pot. I leaned my weight on the desk. A note? Yes, it says, confirmed, ledger disposed, no second copy. I waited a beat. That's all it says? Yes. Typed? Handwritten? Typed. One line, carbon copy, crooked on the page like it was done quickly. All right, Miss Rule. I'll relay this to Mr. Wolfe. He may wish to speak with you. I hung up and turned. Wolfe was already descending the stairs. Silk robe parted just enough to announce that the world remained unworthy of him. You heard, I said. He grunted once, soft. Bring her here, he said. Now. Magda Rule arrived 45 minutes later. She wore a pale green dress, high-necked, creased as though ironed in haste. Her gloves were the same as the night before, beige kid, wrinkled at the thumbs, and her hair was pinned back with less deliberation than it had on her first visit. She clutched a small envelope in one hand and a brown paper bag in the other. I opened the door precisely 8 inches. Fritz was polishing silver in the kitchen, and Wolfe would have made me sleep on the curb if I let a visitor in without ceremony. Miss Rule, I said, you're lucky we're early risers. She gave a weak smile and entered. In the office, Wolfe did not rise. He gestured toward one of the red chairs. She sat, rigid. I brought the note, she said, unfolding the envelope and laying it on Wolfe's desk with the reverence of a relic. He didn't touch it. Describe the placement, he said. She blinked. It was beneath the orchid pot, between the base and the saucer. Folded how? Once, top to bottom. Any impression on the reverse? No. Wolfe glanced at me. I donned gloves from the drawer and retrieved the note, single sheet, typewritten, blue carbon. The message was succinct, clipped, and chilling. I set it down on the blotter. You are certain it was not there before? Wolfe asked. I'm certain, she said. You have not moved the pot since it arrived? No. Then Osborne placed it there himself. She nodded slowly. That's what I feared. Feared? She pressed a palm to her forehead. I didn't know what it meant exactly, but it sounded like something was being silenced. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Indeed, and it was. After she left, Wolfe stayed still for a long stretch, as if the chair had absorbed him. I waited by the bookshelves, pretending to leaf through The Life of the Bee. The silence had the weight of thought, not fatigue. At last he spoke. That note was not a message to Miss Rule. No? No, it was a signal to someone else. I raised a brow. She wasn't meant to find it? No, quite the contrary. She was meant never to look beneath the orchid. Then who was it for? Wolfe sighed through his nose. Osborne placed it beneath the pot, knowing she wouldn't disturb it. But someone else would visit. Someone who would check and report. An accomplice? A partner? He paused. That orchid was not merely a plant, it was a semaphore. A signal? Yes. When the orchid disappeared from the judge's study, someone noticed that someone assumed the ledger was gone, and when Osborne placed the new orchid at Magda's, with the note, he signalled back that it was disposed of. Yes, the note says so explicitly. No second copy. I whistled low. Pretty smooth, I said. They must have really wanted that ledger gone. Wolfe's lips thinned, and Osborne believed he had succeeded, but he was wrong. He didn't know we had it. No, a pause. But now they know the orchid changed hands. They may assume something went awry. And panic? Perhaps. I crossed to the sideboard, poured 2 fingers of sherry. What now? Wolfe didn't answer. Then, Kramer. I blinked. You want to call him? Have him come. Bring the ledger. The original or the copy? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Do not jest, Mr. Goodwin. The original. Inspector Kramer arrived 2 hours later with his usual blend of scowl and sarcasm. This better be good, Wolfe, he growled, settling into the red chair like it owed him money. Wolfe inclined his head. You will be the judge. He handed over the ledger, wrapped in oilskin, sealed with twine. Kramer undid it slowly, like diffusing a bomb. Inside, the pages spoke for themselves. Names, amounts, locations, dates, 6 men, 3 judges, 1 city planner, Fayweather, and the deceased, Justice Yardley. Kramer exhaled audibly. Well, he said. Yes, Wolfe replied. This was the motive. Indeed. And Osborne knew. Wolfe nodded once. We believe Osborne placed a message under an orchid he sold to Miss Rule. The message confirmed the disposal of the ledger and assured no second copy existed. But there is one, Kramer said. There is the original, Wolfe replied. No copies. Still, enough to hang him. Kramer grunted. And the message? Wolfe gestured to me. I retrieved the note and passed it over. Kramer scanned it. Simple. Clean. Coward's script. Agreed. He tucked it into an inner pocket. I'll bring Osborne in. Wolfe raised a finger. Wait. Kramer froze. Why? Because if he believes the ledger is gone, he may lead us to his associates. Let him feel safe. He will reach out, observe whom he contacts. Kramer's lips pursed. You want surveillance? Yes. The silence stretched. Then Kramer rose. All right, Wolfe, but if he bolts? He won't, Wolfe said. He believes the orchid did its job. That night, the brownstone was quiet. I stood at the window with a scotch, watching the fog curl along West 35th like smoke from an unseen war. Inside, the fireplace crackled. Fritz moved through the dining room, clearing what remained of Wolfe's third course. I turned back to the desk. The ledger sat inside the safe now, wrapped, sealed, protected. The orchid that had borne the signal, the second one, rested on a low table near the radiator. Wolfe had placed it there himself, not because it needed warmth, but because symbols, like men, belong in the proper light. The brownstone was colder than usual when the guests arrived, as if the building itself sensed the gathering storm. Fritz had set the dining room table with exacting precision. No wine, no flowers, only crystal decanters filled with water and the barest hint of lemon. Eugenia Fayweather arrived first, gloved hands clutching a small purse, her expression carefully neutral but eyes sharp, like a cat entering a room it did not own. Harold Fayweather followed, tall and straight-backed, with a practiced smile that barely touched his eyes. Last came Osborne, looking as inscrutable as a shadow cast by a flickering street lamp. Wolfe remained in his yellow chair, the ledger concealed behind a locked panel in his desk, not the one the visitors could see. "Please, be seated," Wolfe intoned, his voice low but commanding. The three occupants arranged themselves in the red chairs. Silence fell, punctuated only by the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. Wolfe began. "Mr. Fayweather, Mrs. Fayweather, Mr. Osborne, you are aware of the ledger, are you not?" Eugenia's lips pressed thin. Fayweather shifted uneasily. Osborne's eyes flickered briefly. "We are," Eugenia said. "And you understand the gravity of its contents?" Fayweather nodded. "It concerns private financial transactions, irregular at best, criminal at worst." Osborne's gaze darted to the side, but he did not speak. "Now," Wolfe continued, "you may have noticed the ledger itself is not here." There was a faint stir. "It is secured in a location known only to myself and my trusted aides. In its place, you see this," Wolfe said, lifting a heavy blank ledger from the desk, placing it where the original would be. Osborne's eyes widened imperceptibly. "That blank ledger is a decoy, a bait." "Bait?" Eugenia's voice was sharp. "To draw out the guilty," Wolfe said, "those who believed the ledger was lost." Osborne shifted again, the mask of calm slipping just for a fraction. Wolfe's gaze fixed on him. "Mr. Osborne, you have spent your tenure here as a valet, a servant to this household, but you have also been something else." Osborne's jaw tightened. "You were once known as Clyde Neely." The name struck the room like a gunshot. Osborne's head snapped up. "That is a lie." "It is not," Wolfe said. "Saul Panzer confirmed it." Osborne's hands clenched into fists. "You infiltrated this home to access the judge's private accounts. The ledger was your true target." "I did what was necessary," Osborne said, voice low but defiant. "Necessary?" Wolfe repeated, voice icy. "To ensure the financial future of my employers." "And the judge's life?" Osborne's eyes darkened. "He died on my watch," he said quietly. Wolfe leaned forward. "Tell us how." Osborne hesitated. "I injected him with digoxin," he confessed. "A dose just sufficient to induce cardiac arrest." A gasp escaped Eugenia. Wolfe's eyes were unreadable. "Why?" "The judge was going to expose us, to the authorities, to the press." "And you?" "I protected the operation, my position." Wolfe folded his hands. "Your confession will be turned over to Inspector Kramer." Osborne nodded, resigned. Fayweather said nothing. Eugenia's eyes were pools of disbelief and fear. Wolfe stood slowly. "This ends tonight." Outside, the fog had rolled in thick, swallowing the street lamps whole. Inside, justice was quietly served. The afternoon cast long shadows through the stained glass windows of the brownstone, the light pooling on the red rug like spilled wine. Fritz had prepared the parlour with the precision of a surgeon, every chair in place, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and smoke from Wolfe's favourite Havana. I stood near the doorway, watching the guests arrive. Eugenia Fayweather entered first, her black gloves gripping a small purse as if it contained secrets. Behind her, Harold Fayweather followed with the rigid bearing of a man unused to losing control. Last came Osborne, the man with the wary eye and the steady gait of someone accustomed to surveillance rather than servitude. Wolfe sat in his yellow chair, his gaze sharp beneath the heavy brows. He made no motion to rise, but regarded each guest with the calm inevitability of a judge passing sentence. "Please, be seated," Wolfe said, his voice low and deliberate. They took their places on the red chairs surrounding the table. The silence in the room was as taut as a drawn bow. Wolfe began. "You are all familiar with the ledger in question?" Eugenia's lips pressed into a thin line. Fayweather gave a slight nod. Osborne's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes flickered ever so slightly. "The ledger," Wolfe continued, "details the covert financial dealings of the late Judge Kitteridge, including transactions involving several prominent individuals. However, you may have noticed the ledger itself is not present." There was a subtle stir among the guests. "It is kept securely," Wolfe said, and in its place you see a blank ledger, a decoy. Osborne's pupils dilated just a fraction. This blank ledger, Wolfe explained, serves as bait to draw out those who believe the original lost. Eugenia's voice was icy. You're playing games, Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe's gaze was unyielding. No games, Mrs. Fayweather. Strategy. Osborne shifted uneasily. Wolfe fixed his eyes on him. Mr. Osborne, or shall I say, Mr. Clyde Neely, your true identity has been confirmed by Mr. Panzer. Osborne's jaw clenched. I deny that name. Denial is expected, Wolfe said. Yet the evidence is irrefutable. You infiltrated this household to access the judge's accounts and secure the ledger. A thin smile crept across Osborne's lips. I acted in the interest of my employers. Wolfe leaned forward. And when the judge threatened to expose these transactions, you took matters into your own hands. Osborne's eyes darkened. I did what was necessary. Wolfe's voice dropped. Explain yourself. Osborne's confession was quiet but resolute. I injected the judge with digoxin, a calculated dose to cause cardiac arrest. Eugenia gasped. Fayweather's face tightened. Wolfe's expression remained unreadable. You admit to murder? Wolfe asked. To protect the operation, Osborne said. Wolfe folded his hands. Your confession will be delivered to Inspector Kramer. Osborne nodded, defeat evident. The room was heavy with silence. Wolfe stood slowly. This ends tonight. Outside, fog enveloped the city like a shroud. Inside, the truth was laid bare. The doorbell rang at 6:03. Not the chime of panic this time, deliberate, grounded. I opened the door the standard 8 inches, enough to see Kramer's bulk silhouetted against the darkening stoop. Fedora jammed low. Cigar clenched like a badge of war. He didn't wait for my nod. I stepped aside. Fritz didn't budge. Not that he would. Not for the Pope. You rang the curtain down? Kramer grunted as he stomped off the mat and into the foyer. In 3 acts, I said, with applause pending. He peeled off his gloves, sniffed, and followed me toward the office. Wolfe hadn't moved. Centered in the yellow chair, forearms resting on the armrests like ceremonial scepters. The red client chairs were empty. Osborne had been taken already. Sit, Mr. Kramer, Wolfe intoned. We shall begin. Kramer parked his coat over the side of a red chair but stayed standing. His eyes swept the room like a searchlight, as if expecting blood. You got the ledger? He said. Wolfe didn't reach for it. I retrieved the real one from the wall safe, the actual article, not the theatrical blank we'd baited Osborne with. Pages 17 through 24, Wolfe said. Observe the altered annotations, the injections authorized by an unlicensed administrator. Osborne's own hand. I handed it over. Kramer flipped through slowly, expression blank, but his nostrils flared, the way they do when something stinks, even on paper. Timeline? Included, Wolfe said. Archie, the envelope. I produced it. Neatly typed, tabulated. Each movement of Osborne and the late Judge Hartel from the last 6 weeks. Dates, times, cross-referenced nurse logs and chemical inventories. Fritz had formatted it like a dinner menu. Kramer skimmed it, paused, looked up. You're saying Osborne wasn't just blackmailing Hartel. He killed him. He killed him, Wolfe said, because Hartel hesitated. Kramer dropped the folder onto the table like it weighed 10 pounds. You had Saul and Fred tail him. I nodded. From the moment he started twitching over the ledger, we swapped the real one with a fake, put it in the safe, let him sweat. He went for it? Not quite. Wolfe told him there was a second copy. He snapped, tried to bolt. Kramer scratched his chin. Why not just tell me and let me pick him up? Because he wouldn't have cracked, Wolfe said, voice iron. He needed pressure, a stage, an audience. I saw Kramer register the point, then shift the cigar between his teeth and grumble. You and your damn theatre. There is no theatre, Wolfe said, only justice, with curtains. Kramer sat. Where's Osborne now? Detained, I said. Fred's walking him through the confession. Saul's standing by. Kramer let out a breath. Christ. So it was the digoxin. Wolfe nodded. A precise quantity, untraceable without suspicion, and only a fool administers it through the hip muscle unless he wants it to look like a stroke, Kramer finished. Wolfe raised a brow. I went to pour drinks. One for Kramer, neat. One for me. None for Wolfe, obviously. The orchids take precedence over bourbon. What about Eugenia? Kramer asked. She was manipulated, Wolfe replied. Osborne played her sympathies. She believed he was protecting the judge from scandal. Will she testify? She will, I said. But she's shattered. Fayweather too. He's not a murderer, just a coward in tailored suits. Kramer glanced at the orchid on the desk, the rare one. Crimson petals splayed like a fan in heat. And that? He asked. Pure misdirection, Wolfe said. It was meant to suggest passion, exoticism, a red herring in plant form. Kramer stood and paced toward the bookshelf. So, let me get this right. Osborne fakes his credentials, inserts himself into Hartel's world as a health liaison, finds out Hartel's got a hidden skeleton, uses that to blackmail him into feeding him court decisions and real estate tips. He builds wealth through inside knowledge, Wolfe said, and when Hartel panics, he makes it permanent, Kramer growled. I saw the tension fall across his shoulders like a wet coat. Kramer's moral compass didn't wobble. It pointed true north with a few dents. You'll get the signed confession, Wolfe said. It's notarized. Kramer turned. By whom? Mr. Stebbins, at the 11th hour. Kramer grunted. That man's going to have a heart attack someday. He might not notice, Wolfe said dryly. That got a chuckle. Then a silence, not heavy but closing, like a curtain drawn slow. Well, Kramer said, adjusting his tie. Thanks. He didn't mean it like gratitude. He meant it like punctuation. He started toward the door but paused. One more thing. Yes? If you knew this 2 days ago, why wait? Because, Wolfe said, eyes closing, I detest rushing. Kramer barked a laugh and left. The door clicked behind him. I turned. Wolfe was already rising, slowly with effort but determined. His eyes didn't meet mine. You'll close up, he said. Sure. He moved to the archway, the one that led to the plant rooms. The light there was soft, green-tinted. It made him look almost noble. Archie. Yes, sir? Murder is never art. No, I said, but it sure knows how to imitate it. He vanished into the green. I turned off the lights.